Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening and watching Rashkin Report, and this is the second edition of Wisconsin. It already happened here, and I'm your host. My name is Yuri Rashkin, and joining me, as always for this program, is Andy Jorgensen, former state legislator, a man with a lot of experience around this fine state of Wisconsin. Andy, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Yuri.
This show would not be the same without you. Trust me.
That's what I'm hearing. Glad to play my part.
That's right. Thank you for doing it. So first of all, I'm excited because you had, you're involved with unions, with trades. Yeah. Talk a little bit about that and what's going on there.
Well, last time we talked, we touched on organized labor, and I thought I would do that again because, yeah, as you said, I was just attended a conference, and one of the big things there was the PRO Act. Are you familiar with the PRO Act, Yuri?
I am not. Educate me.
Well, the PRO Act is a big series of endeavors to help organize labor, and it's being debated and voted on in Congress. And it's one of those things in life, and as a legislator especially, you served and you said, oh, the PRO Act, sure, I know that. It's pro-union. That's where they're getting that from. Well, not exactly. And there are so many different initiatives within the act. I thought it would be a good idea to kind of break it down, understand it a little better, and see if people would want to subscribe to it, maybe even call their Congress man or woman, in this case, your senator, because they've already voted on it in the Congress. But PRO is I want to make sure I get this right. It stands for Protecting the Right to Organize. Okay, so they got past the T word there, but PRO, that's what it stands for. And if you didn't know, and I can't go into the details of it, but starting a union is not that easy. There are actual firms that will come in, help your employer out if they want to fight having their employees unionized. They will hire a firm to help them not have their employees unionized with disinformation and other tactics that this addresses. There are some 60 million workers that would vote to join a union today. This comes from the AFL.
Sorry, what was that number again?
60 million workers. 50? The AFL-CIO has put a pin on it. Would unionize if there was the chance to today. And what this bill does, many things, but helps with that to make it a fair fight to become a union. Now, let's just stop right here, because when I talk about unions, there are a couple things that go through people's heads almost immediately. There are some because talk radio for, a decade or more has defined what unions are by saying they get everything they want. They're for the lazy people. They're, corrupt. There's union bosses. Those kinds of things. So let me just say this. In politics, if you flipped on any channel, even Fox News, they would talk to you about healthcare. They would talk about how there's a disparity in wages in America. They would talk about, your voice not being heard. There would be a lot of things that are, a problem in America today. Well, unions aren't answered a lot of those problems, because what a union is not where an employee gets everything they want. It is indeed a chance for an employee to have a seat at the table to, on a regular basis, talk about things like working conditions, wages, and yes, benefits, things like that, but other things.
Because really you feel that the system is basically out of balance, and therefore it's not the situation is such that employees get whatever they want, but that they're barely, they're the other end of that spectrum, really just trying to get the seat at the table.
Right. And we hear these fantastical numbers that the CEO of many companies are not paying any taxes, but that doesn't get ironed out at a bargaining table, but they're making 300, 500 times more than the average worker that's working in their factory. Now, that would come up at the bargaining table to say, we just had a terrific year. A terrific year because our workforce worked really hard for you. And we did these things right. And we know you made this amount of money and we want our fair share. Now, please tell me where there is anything wrong with that. Now, unions are at a low, gosh, I don't even, there's all kinds of numbers out there, but like only 14% now or even less of all Americans are unionized. And let's just keep that to where it should be. All that says is that you would be able to bargain with your employer. You don't get everything you want.
Andy, I actually just saw a very interesting number that said that this pandemic has been has been good for the labor, because as percentage of jobs, number of union jobs has actually increased slightly, because a lot of the jobs that were lost were non-union jobs.
Right. Exactly. And Yuri, it hits home here in Wisconsin. I don't know if you heard about this, but just last month, Collectivo coffee shops are now union coffee shops.
Yeah.
And they belong now to the IBEW. And in your neck of the woods, you've got a union hall in Janesville for the, I think, IBEW 890. And that is amazing. That's quite a story. You're going to have to get someone on here to talk about that story. But the Collectivo coffee roasters in the last 5 months have been going through a grueling exercise of waiting for a decision by the NLRB, by the way, which is now under a Democratic president. And I would probably think that that had something to do with the decision. Without going into all of the details, they now are a part of the Internal Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW Local 494. And this will make Collectivo the largest unionized coffee chain in the country. And they have coffee shops in Madison and in Milwaukee and in Illinois. And so they have gone through a lot. As you know, when coffee shops have different, staffing issues that they would love to bargain on, and now we're going to be able to. We're in the middle of COVID. We thought we were coming out of it, but if you worked at a coffee shop, you can just imagine some of the things that the workers there would like to have to be safe. And all this does, when you're a union, it allows you to, on a regular basis, be able to sit down with management and say, hey, I would think that a plexiglass barrier would be a good idea over here. And bringing that up. Or, this is, we've lost some people to COVID. Let's have a structure when people have to quarantine. Let's bargain what that would look like. Do you get paid? Do you not get paid? That's a question with a lot of companies right now. And what this does is it hashes out things like that. A company can also say, listen, nobody is buying our widgets right now. We're underwater, and they can come to the employees and work situations like that out. It goes both ways. I, was a part of UAW Local 95. I was a shop steward, and I had to bargain with management all the time, and we worked it out. I would listen to their concerns. They would listen to mine, and together, we would find out what we could do to resolve whatever issue it was. And I believe as a result, we were that much stronger as a company, as a whole, as a result.
Do you think that this PRO Act has a chance of actually making it and becoming a law, or is this, there's only so many opportunities to vote on anything,
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because I think there's becoming a log jam, if you will, of potential laws or bills that are getting clogged up in the Senate. And one of the reasons is, we touched on it last time, is because they have the filibuster dilemma, and they have got to figure that out. Joe Manchin is a Democrat. He is not for it. But if you listen to his words closely, he talks about maybe being up for reforming. And we touched on that last time. Some of the ideas that one may have to reform the filibuster. Right now, the minority party can say, oh, we filibuster that and just about everything. And then that requires the majority to have not just one vote over the line, 51 votes, you now have to have 60. They could change that number to 55, perhaps, or they could make it a talking filibuster. Me personally, that's what I would like. If you are calling filibuster, throwing the red flag on the field, I think then that means you don't like what the majority is doing. Maybe your concern is they're going too fast. Maybe it's too extreme, whatever it is. I think one of the things you want as a minority is to say, hey, everybody, pay attention to what's going on here. This is way off the rails. And so if you're going to do a talking filibuster, you could just talk about that bill on and on and on. Now, I don't know what they would probably put on the caveat on that as far as what that would look like. But in my mind, you just talk and talk and talk and raise bring people's attention in on whatever it is you think is broken. Now, think about that. What is the average?
But then again, we did this in Wisconsin, and you were a part of the similar procedure, and and it still gets, in the end, things get passed. So we need something that gets things done. We need, a way to be more effective with this. And right now, one senator seems to have a lot of power.
Yes, I agree with you, but at the end of the day, the majority is still the majority. As much as that pains me to say that, here's an old saying: the minority gets their say, the majority gets their way. And so that's really all the minority can really expect when they don't have the votes to pass something. Yep, you're right. And we can go back to Act 10. We were going to lose. We did not have the votes. The best we could come up with, Yuri, was to bring this to the people's attention and hope that they would get a hold of the people that were on the other side of the issue and get a hold of them and say, hey, you're going to pay at the ballot box next time. You're right. That didn't have any effect on them. I know they heard it, but it didn't work. It was just a stalling tactic. That's all it ever was. As you know, the Senate at that time, too, left the state to hold up the show. And while we were debating,
I think they were looking for like 3 Republicans to switch, something like that.
And they got one for sure, maybe even 2, but Dale Schultz was one of them. But then he lost his job. As a result, he'd probably say it differently. He didn't run again, but he saw the writing on the wall. And didn't run as a result of being on the end, being in the minority in the majority party at that time, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking that right now, these days, I just saw an announcement that former Senator Schultz and Cullen are out on the, I think, road together again, because they've been working together for a long time. And this time it's for redistricting reform. And it's a very noble cause.
Well, it's a hot topic right now because we're in the middle of the maps about to be born.
And you know what? My district is changing.
Yes, it's already happening on a local level. Now
supervisors, and my district is getting like sliced. So I'm going to have to figure out what's going on with my elections.
That is going to happen. No one ever promised anybody who's in elected office right now that their district was going to stay the same. Now, they have the right to squawk about that. I can't say that I wouldn't, but that is part of what will happen. I know I've been listening to different scenarios throughout the state, and there are some thoughts out there. Well, there should be initiatives that sitting representatives or council people or supervisors shouldn't run against each other.
There's a situation I hear of in Rock County where there's like 3 people running for 1 seat. Find
that where it says that isn't supposed to happen. But you do expect an answer as to how these districts were made. I believe that is something that needs to be addressed. For instance, in your neck of the woods, who is drawing your districts? Is it your clerk?
We have an office that I developed these maps, and I can get in touch with them. And so far, I haven't heard back. But we're going to have a meeting here pretty soon anyway. So I figure I live in my neighborhood. What's the worst thing can happen? Of course, the worst thing could happen, I could run against somebody else for the same place. And
Right. And you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet. But the one thing is that it has to keep communities, especially of ethnicity, together. It shouldn't intentionally break communities like that up. That is a precedent that does need to be followed as you go through this. But already it's coming into the local level. Soon it will be statewide, where you'll have new assembly districts, you'll have new Senate districts, you'll have new
But yet, you know
congressional districts.
what, Andy, just to be fair, I am not particularly suspicious of the way Rock County districts were redistricted in the way that they were done in any particular malicious way, intent.
Sure.
When some different like, I mean, I have a sign in my yard says against gerrymandering. So there's a difference how, like, somehow some districts are drawn in a very political way and some are not.
Yeah, and I think some can be drawn that way right from the local level. I'm not saying that, everything has to have a conspiracy theory to it when we don't agree, but we can get questions answered as to why things happened the way they did. I think you expect that. You should. And maybe things do need to be tweaked.
Maybe I'm just naive and I just don't.
Hey, listen, this is something that doesn't happen every day. It happens every 10 years.
Every 10 years. Right.
So, within those 10 years, names and faces are going to change. It's going to be brand new to some. It's going to be old hat to others, but it is going to be a change. And it's hard to adapt. And, it's one that I think take a deep breath when it happens to you. If you're now running against a fellow incumbent or colleague, it's going to be tough, but it does happen. And get your questions answered and make sure it makes sense. And, no one ever promised that that's not going to happen. So look at that. We talked about unions, and now we're already talking about redistricting. But here in Wisconsin, they say that, and I'm not sure who they are, but there are those who say that Wisconsin was the most gerrymandered state in the union 10 years ago. And so, of course, all eyes are going to be on us. And if you didn't know, we didn't have any foot in the door whatsoever as Democrats last time this happened. The governor and both houses were Republican. This time, however, we do have a Democratic governor, Tony Evers, and he has got to bunt heads with Republican-controlled Assembly and Senate. And it's an interesting dynamic. I know you've got a story that addresses some of what's going on. I don't know if you want to show that right now, but I think it does hit upon what is happening and what lays ahead.
I agree, Andy. I think it is time to talk about this story. So I am like, I go through the news and I go, whoa, this would be awesome to discuss with Andy. Story in Politico says how Wisconsin is ruled by a shadow governor. And let me bring it up right here. So actually it's right there. People can see it. And you can see that there's a picture of Robin Vos, and then he's kind of behind Governor Evers, but really he's the one in focus. It seems like he's the one enjoying the moment, being in charge, kind of, while the governor doesn't look quite as certain as Mr. Vos. And so I will just read you some of this stuff. And if you can just give your historical, you kind of know some things, Andy,
Well, I know both gentlemen personally. Sure.
There you go. All right. So this is written by Daniel C. Vaughn, and I haven't checked who he is, but that's pretty professional people writing for them. That's pretty awesome. So Burlington, Wisconsin. Robin Vos isn't the governor of Wisconsin, but he certainly acts like he is. For nearly 3 years, the state assembly speaker has used his Republican majority and the support of the Republicans who control the state Senate to block, thwart, and resist almost every significant move made by Democratic Governor Tony Evers. Before Evers took office in 2019, Vos led the charge to strip power from the incoming governor. When the pandemic hit, Voss helped curb Evers' authority to declare public health emergencies. This spring, Voss tried to commandeer federal rescue money that the governor had the authority to dole out. And when it comes to the governor's legislative priorities, Voss killed everyone. Andy, what do you think?
Well, calling him a shadow governor, I'm not quite sure I can get on board on that, but they are correct in all of those endeavors that were tripped up or stopped by Speaker Voss. Let me describe both gentlemen first. I think you've got an audience that maybe doesn't hail from Wisconsin, want to know who we're talking about a little better. Governor Evers was our superintendent of schools for the state of Wisconsin. He used to be a superintendent of of school districts. I know for at least one. I think in Plymouth was one where he was here in Wisconsin. He's a very mild-mannered man, if you will. He's somebody that, non-threatening. And I think this is an important part to describe him. And I think you'll agree, Yuri, very apolitical. He doesn't really come across as somebody who wants to get down and dirty in partisan politics. He just doesn't. And I really believe that is who he is. He acted that way.
You're right. I agree with you. And I think it's interesting because Republicans in the state have done such a successful job with lots of money painting Democratic candidates as being threatening to people in some way. And it's really hard to paint Tony Evers as threatening. It's just that's not who he is. And I think it being non-threatening has been a huge plus for him, because it's just hard to imagine him being this villain, especially when he comes from being a superintendent of schools. I mean, come on. So my perception.
Now, take that Tony Evers coin, flip it over, and on the other side, almost the exact opposite, is that of Robin Voss. Robin Voss is the Speaker of the Assembly, not the Senate, but he didn't get along with the other leader in that House, Scott Fitzgerald, all that much, and now he his name escapes me, but he is the senator from Ootsburg. And he, I think Robin Voss has got a little more power, whereas Scott Fitzgerald was a seasoned, crafty veteran. Gosh, I wish I knew his name, but I think that's telling. I didn't serve with him, by the way, so his name is not on the tip of my tongue. But the leader in the Senate is someone I think that follows, for the most part, Robin Voss's lead. Robin's been there longer than he has, and is a lot more craftier, and is very political and is very partisan, whereas Governor Evers isn't. I know there's some people listening saying, wait a minute, I've heard Governor Evers talk, and he talks that the Republicans are doing that and doing this. Well, to that I would say you almost have to. It's like you're waiting at a table, waiting for your opponent to come in to work on things and maybe do something together, and they come running into the room and tackle you like a linebacker. What are you supposed to do? You have to react to that, and you can't always be the mild-mannered Tony Evers in order to do that. You're going to get upset at it every now and then, because not only do they say no, they say it with vengeance sometimes. They say it with a lot of fake rage, and yes, I do say fake rage. Oh my gosh, I can't believe he did that. Did they see what Scott Walker did in our state just a few years back? And drastically changed our state, in my opinion, to the worse, just by, saying this is how it's going to be. We don't want to have hearings on this. We're just going to do it. You know why? Because we can. So now they're trying to say to Tony Evers, no, we don't. Oh my gosh, you're so extreme. You're so liberal and things like that. They hardly ever meet. Now, both sides will say, well, it's because of them. They don't want to. And last time they did this and that. And, I'm not here we really need a referee in our state, but they aren't talking. And I think that is a problem, because when you don't talk, I don't care who you are, I don't care what the situation, the dynamic is, you are not going to get anything done. So they have got to get together. And I would hope that in the middle of a pandemic would be the prime time to do that, when people are dying in our state, Yuri, when things have to get hashed out. People are looking to them, local governments, yours that you serve on, I know looks to see if they're going to lead the way on some of these issues we're all dealing with. And here they are not talking at all. And that I certainly don't like. But Robin Vos,
Andy, you are so right on, because really the next thing I wanted to quote for you is actually about how Voss is upset that they're not communicating. But let me read the whole thing. So first of all, his approach is simple. This is Robin Voss again, and offers a model for Republican legislators serving with Democratic governors in other swing states. Deny Democrats any big policy wins, thus depriving them of any major accomplishments to promote when seeking re-election. And Evers, like most governors, is up next year. Voss, the longest serving speaker in Wisconsin history, blames the governor for their antagonistic relationship, but he's especially irked by Evers' decision not to meet regularly with legislative leaders. Voss and Evers often go months without talking face to face. I'm somewhat jealous, this is a quote, of my colleagues around the country when they have a relationship with a governor who at least is smart on policy or is passionate about X, Y, or Z, end quote, Voss said in an interview over the summer. What do you think? Because we just looked at a person who is non-political and a person who is super political, and how do they communicate? Is there a way that they can possibly, I'm trying to figure out, does Robin Voss wants anything that doesn't make things worse? How does it work?
Well, first of all, if you're going to meet, yes, you should, but you both should want to be genuine in trying to work it out. And I think Tony Evers has probably, done this, come to the table only to get his hand slapped so many times, only to have the Republicans running to the podium to talk to the press how bad and how extreme that he was. I think there has to be some sort of understanding. And let's be clear. I mean, that's a two-way street. Oh, they won't talk. I'm sure, and every story has two sides. I'm sure the governor has things to say about why it isn't happening. But this has come up before, where the governor, they looked in, I think, open records request, have found that yes, he was willing to talk. And there was a hand outreached, and that wasn't quite how Robin Voss described it. But if you watch all the Republicans throughout our nation, there are a couple of similarities that need to be pointed out. First of all, the agenda items that they want are, eerily the same. The things that they're trying to accomplish right now, they're trying to drill deep into finding out election fraud, where they have no evidence, they have no story that holds water that they can point to as to why they need to be rushing to do this. But if you look at around from Texas to Florida, and yes, even here in Wisconsin, Robin Voss wants to go on this wild goose chase to find out what he can see to keep this issue alive, that, you know what, your vote didn't count, if that's what you want to believe, or the Democrats are up to some shenanigans, or if you want to take former President Trump's words, the Democrats are the enemy of the people, if you want to go that extreme, and who knows if he does. But if you keep an issue alive by having this unfounded investigation, that's all over the United States in Republican majorities. That is something that they are all doing. And that's one thing. And the other, I know here in Wisconsin for sure, Republicans just want to be in control. Period. They're offended that they don't have the governor's desk anymore, and they want that back. Period. Do they have a plan as to what they're going to do for you and me, Yuri? Not one that I know of. They're just going to do the opposite of what Tony Evers is doing. But you know what? That's not a plan. That's just ideology. That's unbridled.
It sounds to me, how I see it, very similarly. I would just say that the Republicans are interested in control, like you said, just getting to the power.
Yeah.
But to contrast with that, in my experience, and we see this with Biden administration, Democrats want to get things done at their best. when they're not engaged in culture cleansings and all that kind of stuff, Democrats want to get things done much
I
more
would
so
agree with
than
that.
Republicans, who
Well, let me
seem
be a little
mostly just concerned about power.
let me be a little critical of my Democratic colleagues or former ones, not so much here in Wisconsin, but nationally. I think the clock is ticking. We want things done, Yuri. You're right. I think there are plans to do that, but there's just a lot of shaking of fists. And in some cases, having all of the votes that the Democrats can give, whether it be in the House because it's close there or in the Senate, things get stalled right there. I want to see, you know what, everybody in the room throw away the key until they decide that they've got an agreement and then move forward. You know, in even the investigations on especially January 6th, the insurrection, that just started to move and now we're stalled again. Okay, we had that powerful testimony of the police officers that were attacked that day, and now, boom, hurry up and wait. So, to my Democratic colleagues, talking to the people that I know, regular people, they want things done. You're right, Yuri. And I think the Democrats are the group to do it, but let's do it. I don't know what is going on. I don't know if this is strategic to kind of hold off right now and bring it up as we get closer to the next election. Who knows? But I can say that people are getting a little impatient on things actually happening and making their lives better, especially in the middle of a pandemic.
Yes, but if one side is mostly interested in just blocking things, then
Yep, and they are. I mean, don't think for a moment that that's not where that has to be kicked loose. And not only are they blocking things, they are sticking together for the most part. In the Senate, I had high hopes for, let's say, Mitt Romney, the senator from Utah. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd be the guy to get something going other than lockstep with his colleagues. I haven't seen it yet. I know that he does talk a little different than his other Republican colleagues, but when it comes to voting, not so much. And leading the charge on thinking differently on whatever issue you want to talk about, not so much there either. So
but
some really a
what we
disappointment.
see now, we see that those that have opposed, like there's another Congressman Gonzalez, I think today, that said that he's not running for re-election, and he voted in favor of impeachment. So we see more of these people that took a stance being pushed out of the party, and Mitt Romney's trying to do some kind of a balancing act when he voted for one count of the impeachment, but not for both, that kind of a thing. And here
Yep.
he's trying to, and he obviously wants to stay in politics. So he's trying to balance it with his constituents who just support Trump strongly, period. But my curiosity lies with this. If you have like what we just saw in California, where the Republican candidate looked and acted and reminded people of the last president, and he lost this Larry Elder character, I guess, lost big because people just thought, well, we still remember that, and here he is reminding of this. So if entire party moves more to the right and becomes more like Trump, could it actually be like a good thing because they might lose more elections?
Oh, you know what? You raise a good question. I mean, what happened in California? Is there anything to be learned for the rest of the other 49 states? Well, I think there is. I think you touched on it too. I think there was some dissatisfied residents of California, both Republican and Democratic. But then instead of saying, you know what, we're going to recall this guy, by the way, I think they need to revisit that. It shouldn't be that easy to be able to recall a governor. And then immediately, in this case, it was like over 40 candidates are there for you to choose from. And somebody who might have, 10% of the vote is your next governor. That needs to be revisited, and I hope it is. But I think, the rest of us, other than California, were kind of watching what this was. And I think it started out as, hey, we got to get rid of this guy. He's having fancy lunch suppers with lobbyists with his mask off right after he railed on us to be wearing our mask wherever we go in his state. That's one of the things that they were unhappy with. But there's also something else. This recall effort started well before that, well before even the pandemic came to the United States. So this was something that was already brewing with the Republicans long before that. So let's be clear on that one too. But if I remember correctly, and Yuri, you can help me out here, but it started out as, yeah, we should probably get this guy packing. Well, then this Larry Elder guy, he was the Republican that, by the way, didn't get 50% of the vote, but was going to be the next governor, as it turned out. He had 46% of the vote, but never got to that because they didn't vote to recall. But he went way overboard. He went off the cliff. He went too extreme. He turns out the people of California, and I have to believe both Democrats and Republicans, didn't like the extreme rhetoric. They didn't like somebody who says, you're going to be able to rip your mask off. You can go where you want. If you don't want the vaccine, I'm not going to push you to do that. That's your choice. And it freaked people out. And then they went back to the original question and didn't vote to recall at all. So this happened in a very short period of time, it feels like. But I think the people in California were freaked out. Now, what does it say to the rest of us? We're all going to be going through elections in some capacity. In our case, our governor is going to be up, as you mentioned. Will his opponent, whoever it may be, go too far off the rails?
But do they have a choice? Because
I know it.
Their constituency demands it.
They have to win a primary. And in order to do that, as far as I know, Yuri, they have to talk very extreme. They have to talk very Trumpian. I would even argue the Republicans have gotten even more Trumpian than Trump. He's not even our president anymore. But they feel it's this constant race to be more extreme than who your opponent is. And boom, just like that, one day, the primary will be over. And there you'll stand now with all these weird things, extreme things you've just said, and you've got to stand by them and speak to the middle. And guess what? I do believe there is still a middle. There are people that don't always pay attention to politics, but they do when it's time to vote. And if somebody is talking really wackadoo, that's going to have an effect on them. They're going to want to go to the person who's talking normal. And in this case, I don't think there's anybody more normal speaking than our governor, Tony Evers. He hasn't ever been extreme. That one instance that I can think of, sure, he's gotten upset from time to time.
Has he ever gotten upset?
Oh, he's swore a couple times, and yes, he has. He has, very. But you know what? The fact that I can't even remember an instance, I think speaks volumes. But I do know he's gotten upset from time to time, and I'll just leave it there. And he is going to be the guy that I believe, when it comes down to it, if the Republican, whoever it is too extreme, and they see Tony Evers, well, I'm going to go with that guy. That guy's not going to hurt me. That guy's not going to go, into a land that I don't even recognize. He's not going to go after some of this agenda stuff that like Texas is going through when it comes to abortion, or act like the governor of Florida, who is so extreme on how he feels about masks that people are literally dying because of his poor decision making. I think there is a middle. And I think Governor Evers knows where it is in our case. And I think if California speaks to Wisconsin in any way, I think it's good news for Democrats, and especially for our governor, Tony Evers.
All right, then I will take this and take this into our last topic here. It seems like I've read, it seems like Governor Newsom in California learned he learned from Scott Walker, because Wisconsin had already happened here. And Scott Walker beat a recall. And this was very unusual because governors kind of don't usually win recalls, but Scott Walker did it. And so you have a governor from very different ideology who looks at this as a technological process and says, what happened? And what happened was Scott Walker really went on attack against the unions, because Scott Walker really couldn't talk about his amazing record. There was no record to speak of other than trying to destroy the union movement. And so what he did is he continued to go on attack against the unions, and he beat the recall. So maybe those two things were connected. And so what it seems like Governor Newsom is done in California is he went on attack rather than talking about his record, which I guess there isn't much of either, because he was just recently elected to his first term as governor. Granted, he's been in politics for a long time, but whatever. So he went on the attack, and he went on the attack, first of all, against his crazy opponent, which is, I guess, like he was asking for it. That was like a low-hanging fruit. But he also went on the attack against anti-vaxxers. And this seems to be like something that immediately President Biden took, because he sees that this is working. So now you have a bigger kind of like company taking over the technology. But the approach of trying to create some success, because most people, by attacking, like Biden said, our patience is growing thin, and kind of like it is kind of antagonizing the country at the same time. It's kind of radicalizing things a little bit, which is what Biden supposedly doesn't want to do. But it could be a very winning strategy, because most people prefer being vaccinated and are kind of frustrated with people who are not vaccinated, who are a minority, and also happen to be, many of them support Trump. Just happened. So like, how do you equalize all of this?
Well, you laid a lot out there, but let me try to attack it by just saying this virus is very vicious and getting worse with the variant. We just recently learned of news, a middle schooler, 13-year-old student up in Fort Atkinson, where I used to represent and live, has died. So this is going to, we're going to have more and more stories where it's going to hit home for many of us, people. It's going to be closer than it ever has been, and it's going to hit a whole new crowd, if you will, of younger people. And so, how some people may feel today may not be the same way they feel, come election time. And I think to some extent that's happening and happened in California. Now, you mentioned the recalls, and you drew the similarity between Wisconsin's recall of Governor Scott Walker that was unsuccessful. Yes, he beat it last time, but you got to remember our recalls are totally different. In California, you have to first vote to do a recall. In Wisconsin, you just need the correct amount of signatures to get a recall, and that automatically starts an election. In California, you vote to recall or not after the whatever conditions are met before that. And then right then and there, if you vote to recall, then you have to go through a whole list. It was over 40 candidates that were on the ballot that you had to choose from. So here in Wisconsin, they got the right amount of signatures. And then there was some time between that happening and for a candidate to emerge that was going to run against Scott Walker. In this case, it was Tom Barrett, the mayor of Milwaukee, former congressman. Now, by the way, the ambassador to Luxembourg. Ever been to Luxembourg, Yuri?
I hope to someday.
Okay, well, I don't want to get sidetracked. So
right, Luxembourg.
Wow. I remember.
It was funny because I had one encounter with Barrett, and I lost an election shortly before. And he remembered meeting me at some fundraiser, and he said, I was told you have to be a little bit delusional to be in politics, and you have to believe in, you have to be a little bit crazy. And I was like, thank you very much. It was very nice.
Okay.
Great guy.
You are a world traveler. I'd be very disappointed if
I'm in Luxembourg,
not having gone to Luxembourg.
Yes.
Yeah, Luxembourg it is. Luxembourg or bust. Get a t-shirt.
All you have to do anywhere in the world, I think, is wear a sweater that says Wisconsin, and like people identify each other within like just minutes. You can be anywhere, probably in Luxembourg too.
Well, there's only one way to find out, Yuri. I know you're on it. But anyway, back to our recall. So it goes a little differently. I'd like to say a little slower because it's actual two opponents. You know who they're going to be. You're not guessing. In California, you were pretty much guessing. You didn't know who one of the 46 was going to be. An idea, but you didn't know. And, it was a kind of a different dynamic. So back to Wisconsin almost 10 years ago when the attempt to recall Scott Walker happened. Yuri, you may remember this, but I think what Scott Walker's key to success was he had a commercial that ran. I remember it was two gentlemen fishing. They're like in the early morning or at dusk. And they're talking about the recall, and they're trying to recall Governor Walker. And I don't really agree with everything he says, but I voted for him, or I didn't vote for him, and you got to give him a chance. I don't think that this recall is right. So I thought that was the reason, that was the secret sauce, if you will, as to how he pulled it out. Yes, he attacked his opponent. His opponent attacked back. I don't even remember any of those attacks, but I do remember that commercial that just talked about the recall itself, and kind of triggered something in us as humans that says, Yuri, I voted for you, or even if I didn't vote for you, you won. And your term is 3 years, or in this case, 4 years. I think it's only the right thing for you to be able to finish out your term, and then we'll take a look at your record, and then we will decide whether or not to re-elect you. I don't like this talk of a recall, and he attacked the recall itself, and I believe that was one of the reasons, if not the reason, why he was able to defeat the recall.
I think there's different ways of looking at it. I think that,
well, that's mine.
Right, but that's yours. Exactly. And it's a beautiful, I could see that commercial in my mind's eye. It was great.
Yeah, it was one of those things, but anyway, it's funny. And this is what I like about being on this show. We started out talking about the PRO Act and very shortly talked about it. I think people should really do and then we moved on to, I don't know how many other topics, but it is something that I think people should do the due diligence and learn more about. And while you're doing that, learn more about unions. Because as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, we've gone full circle now. I think that unions, they address a lot of what is wrong in America today. Low wages, healthcare, equality, things like that, working conditions, safety. These are all things that get worked out. Nobody gets everything they want. They just are dealt with. They are negotiated, and a deal is struck, hopefully, and together, both sides come together on working together to make money, to provide jobs and a great way of life for those employees and the employers. What is wrong with that? I think if we have a strong union, we have a strong America.
Andy, I think it's great to begin and end the show by talking about unions. I think it's awesome. Thank you so much. This was the second episode of Hey, Wisconsin. It already happened here. And your hosts are Yuri Rashkin and Andy Jorgensen.